Relationship dilemmas for you today. So the first one we have is Eve. She has a pattern of attracting men with addictions, and now she wants the right kind of relationship. We also have Jane, who feels she isn't being treated fairly at work and wants to know what she can do about it. And we have Sandy, who is struggling to communicate easily with her father. Okay, so let's get into the first dilemma for today. Okay, so we have Eve, who wants to forgive the past and move on with trust. Okay, and Eve is a life code 9. So we have 3 people involved. We also have her ex-husband, who's a life code 110. I think we're going to put him here. It's a 110 here. And we have her ex-partner, who is a life code 9. Yep, life code 9. Okay, so we have 2 life code 9s, and we have 1 life code 110. So we'll have a look in a moment as to why I've put the ex-husband dressed as Superman. Okay, so what has Eve told us about her situation and what she wants me to have a look at? Okay, so there is a repeating pattern of betrayal in my love relationships in my life. My ex-husband betrayed me with his addiction to gambling. I couldn't trust him due to lies. Then I was in a relationship for 9 years with another partner that was broken by his addiction to alcohol. I lived with another guy and he betrayed me with multiple relationships with other women. I've been alone since that in 2009. I feel unable to trust men. So what's the problem the situation creates? I'm lonely, resentful of others who have a loving relationship and feelings of depression and anger. My parents died in 2011 and 2014, and due to things done by 3 of 4 sisters, I only trust one. Am I meant to be alone? I feel stuck and hurt emotionally. So what is the question that she would like me to answer for her? What is the purpose of these betrayals? How do I forgive and move forward, trust again? Am I meant to be alone to fulfill my life purpose? Okay, so Eve wants to understand the energy around this past pattern so that she can release it and move forward with confidence. Okay, so clearly what we have here, obviously we're going to have a look at in terms of the life codes, where we have addiction type scenarios going on here. Okay, so why Eve is attracting these kind of relationships and why they feel attracted to her. Okay, so we have the ex-husband here, and I've chosen this character dressed as Superman because we're looking at gambling addiction as far as he's concerned. And the thing is, generally with gambling addiction, people get caught in this cycle of feeling that somehow or another, at some point or another, they're going to turn into this superhero where everything then turns good and it's going to be fine and they don't need to mention it. They get secretive about it. They hide it because at some point or another, they're going to have this big break that's going to be fine and make everything fine and dandy. Why have we got the ex-partner as this life code 9, as this kind of rock-playing man-child? Because I suspect that what we're going to have in this situation is something come up where Eve is feeling that she's having to parent these kinds of characters. Okay, so the ex-partner had alcohol addiction and the ex-husband had a gambling scenario. So why is Eve around these scenarios or has been around these scenarios, and where she's got into this situation now where she feels she can't trust herself as far as possible future relationships are concerned, even though she wants to be able to trust and wants to be able to go into one. So what do we have here? Well, as a life code 9, anyway, so we'll start with Eve as that life code 9. Life code 9s often get the blame for things because they reflect people's unconscious. They reflect aspects of the subconscious. So if you look at here, the 9 is represented by the moon. Things that are not highly effective, but not particularly tangible. We know that the moon cycles have a strong pull and a magnetic pull. Of course they do, because they can affect tides, or the moon does affect tides and things like that. But we don't really physically see the impact of the moon like we see the impact of the sun, as an example. So for life code 9s, often they find themselves on the receiving end of the undertone of something, what's going on underneath the undertone of these kind of situations. 110s, we are in a 110 year, so the 110 energy becomes very relevant for everybody this year moving forward. So what does that mean for Eve in terms of her life? So she's going to have recollections this year of looking at some of those things in her life as far as her ex-husband was concerned, and probably the secrecy around the gambling and all of that kind of thing as to the reasons why and the blame. So quite often life code 9s take the feeling that they are either being blamed or they take the blame for other people's actions and behaviours. They assume that it's their fault. And so when they get into assuming that it's their fault, that's when, exactly as Eve is describing, that they get defensive and rejecting. So they become kind of defensive around things and reject. So hence the situation where Eve is finding herself automatically rejecting and being very honest in what she's saying here, but she now feels lonely and resentful of other people with good relationships. Now that's brave. That's really brave, because she's admitting that she's feeling powerless as far as these scenarios are concerned, which suggests very strongly that she's an aware 9, because normally people wouldn't necessarily do that as the ex-partner, okay? Because clearly, with most addictions, not all the time, but certainly in my experience of interacting with people with addictive pasts or addictive presence and things like that, what is the addiction about? It's about keeping away from something that feels uncomfortable, something that feels painful, or some kind of inadequacy. So I would say the link between these figures, all of them, is a deep inadequacy, feeling of inadequacy. So for the 2 life code 9s, there would be a deep unconscious inadequacy, but in Eve's scenario, she's owning it, as we can see, she's owning it. So her addiction, so to speak, might be something along the lines of disruptive relationships, because if they're disruptive, she doesn't have to then feel the pressure of having to be present, or the really strong, which happens for a lot of people, fear that if you can truly love and trust someone, that they might leave you. Okay, so then it's safer to actually get involved with people on an unconscious level, especially as that life code 9, with people that you can guarantee are going to be untrustworthy. Hence the scenario what we have here with 2 people that she really very strongly felt that she couldn't trust. And then we have also, the most recent ex-partner, as far as the relationships are concerned. Okay, so we've got betrayal in all the different key areas. So then Eve's energy to solve is coming closer and closer, because now it's showing in actual relationships. Okay, so the question becomes, how can Eve, or what is it that Eve needs to reconcile within herself in order to be able to release the pain of these past relationships and begin the process of attracting wholesome interactions that she feels safe enough to stay around? So in order to answer that question, we're not really looking at the wounds necessarily of the ex-partners, but we'll have a look to see whether any of that is relevant. But we'll have a look primarily at the wound of Eve and her fear. There will be a strong fear deep within somewhere of being abandoned. So I know it sounds bizarre, but the safety then is to then attract relationships where you can guarantee that they're going to abandon you, so that you can never really truly be disappointed, because a part of you always kind of knew that something about them would be an abandoning scenario, even if it wasn't immediately obvious. And for a life code 9, even if it wasn't immediately obvious, that wasn't immediately obvious that there was alcohol, that there was gambling, Eve's unconscious, because she's ruled by the subconscious, will have known. Okay, would have known. So even if she couldn't quite put a finger on it at the time, a part of her will have known. So she would have then continued those scenarios, because at some deep level it would have been safe, because she never really fully had to be involved. Okay, so let's have a look to see what Eve's wound is that her unconscious is trying to heal, in order then to release herself from addictive relationships. Okay, so I'm thinking of Eve as far as that scenario is concerned. And let's see what we get. So using my big pile of archetypes, let's have a look and see what we get. Okay, so we have the Advocate. I would say that Eve has, at some point in her life, seen herself in a position of being the peacekeeper. I want to say maker and keeper. And we can also look at this in terms of, the question that she's asked, and also see that 3 of her 4 sisters she's also found to be scenarios that let her down. So that suggests to me that in her foundational experience there would have been clashes, difficulties as far as the family dynamics were concerned, and so she would have felt, so certainly she's at least one of 5, that maybe the pecking order was strong. Okay, so within that pecking order, at some level or another, she would have felt she either had to be the peacekeeper of other people's squabblings, or she would have to pacify in order to keep others happy. Hence the reason now, I suspect, is the reason why she feels resentful of others who have a loving situation. Okay, so let's see if I'm right, and we'll see whether maybe that issue was to do around communication. So we'll have a look as far as, I think we'll look at the ex-husband first as that life code 110, see whether I'm right around that. So I'm thinking of that, the essence of the whole picture, whilst I choose something to reflect that. Let's have a look. We have the monk stroke nun. So I would say, interestingly, that I'm right as far as the abandonment scenario is concerned. Why? Because, why would I say that would be true of a monk or a nun? Because monks and nuns are the archetype of being alone. So they're the archetype of being alone, and in worship of an invisible force. So for the ex-husband, he would have been alone and in worship of an invisible force. For him, his invisible force was gambling. Okay, so he would have been completely emotionally unavailable. So for Eve, actually, the deep core of her would say that love is unavailable, I suspect. And this would be linked strongly with the unconscious of the 9 energy mixed with the 110 of the physical world. So I suspect that a strong part of Eve has never felt fully supported. Okay, never felt that at all. And this is highlighted by the ex-husband as far as that energy is concerned. So let's have a look as far as the ex-partner is concerned. Let's see it reflected in the 9 energy in Eve's own sphere of energy field. Let's have a look and see what we get. Okay, so thinking of the ex-partner. Hedonist. Okay, so everything would have been about him. Okay, everything would have been about him. Everything would have been about what he needed, what he wanted. So again, something else, so in his case the substance, became the relationship. So the real core issue for Eve to solve is the fact that she's felt, is to retrace in her life the time when she felt like the ultimate peacekeeper. And that, I strongly suspect, would take her back to early years. Observing a family dynamic, an argumentative family dynamic where she either had to be the peacekeeper, or had to act out things quietly because it wasn't, she felt uncomfortable with involving herself in that situation or in that dynamic. But her psyche would have then learnt that relationships are selfish. And her psyche would have then thought, well, relationships are selfish and I'm never put first. Therefore, her 9 vibration would say, okay, well, the safe relationships are the ones where they are distracted by something else. So the ex-husband, it was by his own aloneness and need for abandonment, and then therefore his worshipping became the gambling. And for the ex-partner, around his alcohol abuse, it was everything to do with what he wanted and couldn't see beyond that, in terms of maybe healing through a partnership. So how does Eve solve this? Well, in order for her to release her resentment and come into a place of trust, she actually needs to go back in her mind beyond these relationships, back to any foundational experiences. In my suggestion definitely is that life code 9, to just think about, and for a life code 9, again, this would be particularly easy, is to just think, okay, when was the first time that I observed a situation where I felt that I was having to be peacemaker, I could see this, or that it was the safest thing to do around that was not to get involved and was to emotionally withdraw. If she can then recall that scenario, quite often all it is, especially for a life code 9 in that 9 vibration, is the recollection of that, for that energy to just move on and release. I've seen that so many times, where just recognizing it gives it the power to just disperse itself, to then feel the reality underneath. And then Eve would do very well to then become her own peacemaker, to make the peace within herself, that actually the core of her has felt emotionally abandoned for most of her, I suspect, for most of her life, where people around her's interests have been everywhere else. So how does she solve that moving forward? She solves that moving forward by experimenting with this possibility of that, yes, there are kind people in this world, and that if a relationship doesn't feel kind to her, then to let it go, and to be unafraid to let it go. And then she might say, well, I wouldn't have any relationships in my life. Well, if you then can experience that own kindness towards yourself, you'd be amazed how attractive that is also to kind people. And then you start attracting back into your life. Okay, maybe initially quite slowly, but you then start attracting back into your life, or into your life even for the first time, relationships based on kindness. How can I say that? Because I know that as a life experience. So, what can we learn from that? Especially as a sensitive. As a sensitive, we can learn from this scenario that actually it's not always the people showing us a level of dysfunction, so in these ex-partnerships, that are the source of our angst. Sometimes it goes a level deeper and a level further back, and when we access that point, it can offer, and I say in my experience, you take what resonates, you put to one side what doesn't, it can offer a huge sense of relief, and the ability to move forward. So, before we go into the next dilemma, we have an important message from our sponsor, me, whilst I clear the board, and then we move on to our next dilemma. And I say, if you like the archetypes, take what resonates, put to one side what doesn't. To love. Oh, not Ken. Oh, sorry about the audio. I'll be back in a moment. And then we move on to our next dilemma. And you can see examples of this and sign up to have these 2 free predictions sent to your inbox every month by visiting HeidiSawyer.com/mind. Oh, sorry about the audio. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so let's get into dilemma number 2 for today. So we have Jane, who wants to leave her job but is feeling stuck in a difficult situation. And Jane is a life code 4. So we have 3 people involved as far as this is concerned. We have the boss. Okay, so we have the boss, who's a life code 5. And we have a co-worker and friend, who is also a life code 5. So why have I made the boss the devil in disguise? Well, I'll explain that in a moment. So let's get on to what Jane has told us. Okay, so my boss treats me in a way that I don't like. I'm not getting the respect I deserve. Like it's as though I'm a less than, as if they have a lesson to teach me. They won't treat me as a 46-year-old woman. I feel treated like a teenager or someone who knows nothing, but at the same time they need me. I desperately want to leave this job, but I haven't found another yet. So what's the problem the situation creates? I desperately want to leave this job, but I haven't been able to. I'm getting angrier by the minute and very resentful. I don't deserve this. On the other hand, my personal friend and co-worker wants me to stay in the job, but I'm also getting angry at her due to the situation, even though it's not her fault. So what's the question that Jane wants me to answer? Is there a way out while I'm there and find another job? Is there a way I can change this energy? Okay, so Jane wants to move on to another role, but also manage this situation in her current job. So what do we have here? Well, we have 2 life code 5s and a life code 4. These are strongly connected straight across this path. So if we look at here, straight across this path as the 19th path, when it crosses directly in the middle here, across the 13th path, which is the path of challenge. So for life code 4 coming up against the life code 5, that will feel definitely as though they're being bullied or ganged up on. And so you have 2 life code 5s, one trying to play good cop, one being actually quietly manipulative in a way which, and it's one of those energies where someone is unkind, bullying, that kind of feel, but at the same time going, it's not me, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm very reasonable, I don't know what you're talking about. And we can see that dynamic is being played out because the other life code 5 can't see the full picture and thinks that Jane is probably being a little too sensitive, as we've all found as sensitives, that people have this tendency to actually say this towards us when really we're not too sensitive. We're actually seeing something for the way that it is, and that another person might want us to pretend it's something different. Okay, so what I would describe as what's been explained here as far as Jane is concerned, this is a typical kind of bully scenario where it's manipulated, where it then becomes the person who is complaining about situations fault, or it's masked and it's moved around to the extent where they then start to believe that it's their fault. Now, as a life code 4, Jane's whole persona will want to is about love. Okay, it's about love. So all she'll want is to just work somewhere that she loves, that she can just be herself, interact with people. I strongly suspect she's not asking for much. Whereas this unaware life code 5s have this warrior energy and a strong will. But at the same time, it's not owning their will, okay? And when a life code 5 doesn't own their will, as in this warrior energy, it becomes about destroying other people, but quietly so. Okay, it becomes a fixation as far as that's concerned. Now, why have I got this boss as as this devil figure, and this sort of butter wouldn't melt in my mouth kind of devil figure, is because I suspect that that's how she plays it. Okay, so let's have a look as far as the archetypes are concerned, and let's see what lesson there is to learn for Jane as far as this situation is concerned, if there is one to learn. Okay, so I'm thinking of Jane in this situation, and let's have a look and see what we get. Okay, so thinking of Jane, let's have a look, see what we get. Okay, so we've got the trickster here. So Jane is feeling, I would say, when we have this trickster, Jane is feeling that she's needing to feel really quite suspicious of everything, that nothing feels like it's staying. The trickster is always doing something else. It's always having to juggle something or change something or be a performer in some way or another. So I suspect that Jane is finding that it's quite hard to actually get on with her work because she's having to perform for this boss and dance a different tune depending on what mood she's in. So now Jane's sense of self-worth will be becoming something that's quite fragile, especially as that life code 4. Life code 4s are stability. They like working with stability, and so her sense of self will start to become, and her self-esteem will start to be impacted and affected, which will be the reason why she hasn't found another job yet, because her sense of self-worth is starting to be impacted because she can't actually get on with her job. She's having to juggle the mood of this boss of hers. So let's have a look and see what this boss is up to. Okay, so thinking of the boss as that life code 5, let's see what she's up to. Okay. Oh, we've got 2 that's come out here. Huh. Okay, so we've got the warrior and the athlete. Okay. So what she'll be, this boss, is she'll be a lastminute.com. She will be someone who wants it now, yesterday, quickly, done, wasn't done, all of that kind of thing. In terms of her attitude. Why do I say that? Because we've got this athlete here. Okay, so she'll be doing that. And then we've got the warrior. Now, a life code 5 is the warrior anyway. It's the warrior energy. So she'll be aggressive, highly aggressive with how she communicates that, which will then be impacting Jane in terms of feeling that, oh, hang on a second, I feel like I can't just get on and do what I'm supposed to do because this person keeps changing the goalposts. Because as the athlete energy, she'll like some intensity, she'll like some drama and that kind of thing. So let's see what this co-worker Jackie is up to. What's she up to as far as that's concerned? Let's see what's going on there. Okay, so we've got the Midas stroke miser. So what Jackie thinks is that she can be persuasive. So she thinks that Jane can be persuaded. So one moment she'll be all persuasive, and the next minute she'll be withholding attention. So what Jane will find is that when the boss is around, Jackie goes all, she starts to be the miser and withdraw her energy as far as Jane is concerned. But then when the boss isn't around, she'll be the Midas and she'll be all over, which is, oh, well, we can turn this, into gold, we can give it the Midas touch, we can make it wonderful, all of this. So this will again be impacting Jane's sense of worth and her self-esteem. So, her question also is, how can she solve this whilst also looking for another job? Well, as I said, this kind of lack of stability has been impacting her sense of worth. So one of the key things she needs to be sure of is when she's looking for another job is that she's able to, the new job has some consistency to it, and that the person that she'll be working for has a line of consistency as far as that's concerned, that it's consistent, that it's predictable to a certain degree. Some lines of certain things are predictable, and that on interview that she's able to say that. One of her key strengths is she works methodically, but at the same time she likes to have a strong level of consistency from the person that she's working for. And then she's kind of almost interviewing them at the same time as being interviewed. And then if those values match, she will be someone who's high on that person's priority list, because actually she's defining the person that she's comfortable with working with. How can she solve this situation with the boss right now, where they stop winding her up and this kind of undertone, because they know that she has a strong line of efficiency and does things properly, yet the boss has this need for drama and intensity, so therefore has to make Jane feel like she's having to do an eggshell dance. So how does she minimise that? How does she get to minimise that situation? Well, Jane would, instead of getting angry with what's being delivered, is to actually say to the boss, and say, and probably in front of somebody else, just so that the boss will then temper any bad behaviour down, which would be to say, well, out of these things that you've given me to do, which one is your priority? Because obviously then I need to get that one done before the others. And then if the boss says, well, they're all my priority, so, well, okay, absolutely, I realise that they're all exceptionally important, but which one would you like to be done first? Because you need something done first rather than all together. That's not something that's possible. Well, I want it done as all together. And say, well, it's not possible. So you need to choose which one is the priority so that you have it exactly, you have everything exactly when you need that. And please give me, tell me when that is. But rather than this woman, this boss with that warrior, because she wants any excuse to be aggressive, she'll react to tonality, to how it's said to her as an excuse to attack Jane. So Jane would need to be clear but neutral in her tone, so that this woman has nothing to be able to pick on. And if she's able to do that, what she's actually doing is defining the boundary with this person without stating what the boundary is. And I strongly suspect then that this woman will back off as far as that's concerned. But it still means that it would be good for Jane to actually change environments, because this direct hit straight across from this 5 energy is too much to have in the long term, because clearly the boss likes a bit of drama. So what is the lesson to learn as far as this is concerned? What can we learn from this scenario? That sometimes, or actually, you can define a boundary by and if you're wanting to change your environment, change your working environment and all of that, is not to have to go out to fix your sense of self-worth, self-esteem, but to define boundaries in an interview, because you're defining that within yourself, as in what you are prepared to accept in your life. And actually, in the longer term, people will respect that, and then that's when you get to choose the right environment. Okay, so before we go on to the next dilemma, we have another important message from our sponsor, Still Me. I'll be back in a moment whilst we clear the board. And sorry about the sound. Apologies. Okay, so the third dilemma for today, we have Sandy. Okay, Sandy is finding her father increasingly inflexible and wants better communication. And Sandy almost disappeared. Sandy is a life code 211. Okay, and so we also have her dad, who is a life code 9. Okay. And we also have her mum, who is, again, a life code 211. Okay, and I'll explain why. She's got a tape over her mouth, or why it would be perceived as that, as we go into this dilemma. Okay, so what has Sandy told us? My dad gets so stressed, irritated, and negating in a negative way with allowing simple flowing conversations or suggestions. Once a decision has been made or a course of action decided, or knows what he's going to happen, any other views or expressions or changes seem to cause confusion and irritation. He had bowel cancer 3 or 4 years ago, and with a colostomy now clear, also has a small abdominal aneurysm, so can understand his fear and lack of control. What's the problem the situation creates? It causes anger, upset, as I feel unable to express myself without causing him stress or pressure over what seems like a normal conversation flow. Feels like a lack of respect and trust that anything I say is just an irritation or annoyance, to want to cause him pressure or frustration. We do get through these, but it leaves a residue with me. So what is the question that she wants me to solve? How can I express myself without causing irritation or stress as both sad? What do we need to be aware of to change? Okay, so Sandy is asking me how to better communicate with her father without distressing him, where he gets into this kind of stress scenario. So we've got 2 life code 211s, which I know that Sandy hasn't mentioned her mum, but she has actually put it down as a relationship dynamic within this to have a look at. So we will have a little look at as far as that's concerned. And we have a life code 9, which is the dad, and we'll put the dad behind bars, so to speak, because he's got some frustration thing going on how he's able to communicate. So he's a life code 9. 211s are quite often a lot more expressive, so they're more likely to say how it is, what it is. Okay, and a life code 9 within that scenario, because they reflect the unconscious, quite often like to keep things quiet or secret, especially if they're unaware 9, because they're afraid of their deeper sense of who they are. Whereas a 211 is more inclined to call them out on it, or to just call things out just generally in life as far as that dynamic is concerned. Why? Not intentionally, they just do. Okay, so it can cause a level of frustration to someone who doesn't want anything to be highlighted or drawn out. So I suspect that Dad is actually really quite frightened. Okay, so I suspect that that's what it is. And so anything outside of what he can hold within this framework of what he thinks he wants is unsettling or he doesn't want to know. So let's have a look, and I think we'll look to see what the dad is up to first, over and above anybody else. Okay, so I'm thinking of the dad. Let's see if I'm right, if he is fearful. Okay, we've got the destroyer. Interesting. So, actually, I would say, if we've got the destroyer, he's not actually fearful. He's just downright unpleasant as far as this scenario is concerned. It is demeaning, and it will be something to do with just the way as his chosen format of communication. And this won't, if we have this destroyer here, it's not new. This isn't new. Okay, it's now showing in this kind of irritation behaviour. Okay, he's had cancer, and he's okay, and all of that kind of stuff. It's okay at the moment, but actually he is knowingly disruptive if he's got this destroyer here. So he knows that how he behaves towards his daughter is actually causing stress. Okay, so let's have a look as far as Sandy is concerned. And let's see what she's up to as far as that's concerned. So I suspect that with that there, then she's had to be, someone who's always putting his thoughts over and above her own for forever. I doubt whether this is new. So let's have a little look and see what we come up with. Okay. Oh, gosh, we've got the servant. Interesting. So he expects to be waited on hand and foot, and that actually that I don't like to say this, but this is how this is showing, is, I've had a child, therefore you have to serve me and do as you're told. Why do we have children in life? Well, they're there to serve us when we get older. So, if you won't serve me, I can get cantankerous. You have to just listen to what I want. I have no interest in listening to you because you're the servant. I know that sounds dreadful, absolutely horrific, but actually that's the undertone of this 9 frequency and 9 vibration as to what's going on. So let's have a look and see, because we've got the mother with the tape over her mouth, as in it's silent within here, but let's see how if that's been fed during this man's life at all. Let's have a look and see what's there, okay, as far as the mother is concerned. Okay, let's have a look. Oh gosh, couldn't make this up if I tried. We've got the mediator. Okay, so the mother is literally that with the tape over her mouth. Is the kind of placator, the mediator, the one in the middle, trying to solve. Oh well, quiet and quiet, but it will be everything towards making the father's behaviour, or having a reason or an excuse for the father's behaviour. So, how does she solve this? Actually, the way to solve this would be to call him out on it. Is to actually say to him, look, the way you're speaking to me isn't acceptable. Regardless of what's going on in your life, actually speaking to me like that isn't acceptable. And if you carry on like that, actually, I'm not coming round. And if he then kicks off and all that, just leave him to it, and actually insist on decent lines of communication by actually holding that to a higher standard. Sandy isn't a servant. She isn't, the reason that people have, or the correct reason to have children, has got nothing to do with them serving you later in life. We bring children into this world to learn about ourselves. We bring children into this world to as our contribution to humankind. It's not about we have children in order to, when I get old, get the kids to look after you. No, that's what they're there for. But that's clearly what this man, Psyche, believes. Whether, if he was questioned on that, whether he actually said, "Oh yeah, I don't believe that," but his Psyche believes that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coming out as far as this is concerned really clearly, because this isn't what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting for this destroyer to come out, but that's clearly what this is, especially matched with that servant. So Sandy would do very well to actually call him up on that, and if he continues to be cantankerous, say, well, fine, I'll be round when you're pleasant, and to leave it at that. So let's have a quick look and see if Sandy is able to do that, how or what impact that has on her life. Okay, she might be a bit scared and go, whoa, that feels like I'm standing up, and am I allowed to do that? Surely that's not the right thing. I am supposed to be the servant, because maybe she's been trained to believe that. So let's have a look. If she stands up to him and says, look, hang on a second, it's not nice. No, it's no way to talk to anyone. What benefit that is to Sandy. Let's have a look. Okay, so what this means is, interestingly, is that, and this is we've got the mystic. So, interestingly, this is something that matches very strongly with a life code 211. So I would say, this is specific for a life code 211, and how I'm to explain this it would mean that if Sandy was able to do that, she'd actually step into herself, step into her own power. It doesn't mean then she's suddenly become a mystic or kind of deeply intuitive as far as life scenarios are concerned. It means that a life code 211 is deep, strongly intuitive. Part of their life path is that they are the most intuitive of all the different life codes. That's the consensus as far as that's concerned, because the 2 energy is the energy that everything filters through. Okay, so everything from the whole self, so everything that's intangible is filtered through the 2 first, and then it passes to the 3 into creation. Okay, so that's why the 2 energy is naturally intuitive. So what this says to me very strongly is, if Sandy is able to do that, she will actually find who she is, what her own strengths are, who she is, what she wants in her life, and her own self-power, as far as she's concerned. If she's able to say, actually, no, it's not okay to speak to me like that, regardless of who you are or whatever your life situation is. So, what can we learn from this? Well, actually, sometimes we think that family members, sometimes we think that family members are, it's family. We can take however they speak to us because they're family, and yet they have some kind of right to be able to do that. Actually, they don't. And everybody has the right to be able to ask to be spoken to in a pleasant and decent way, because I can guarantee that this man does not speak to everybody else like that, or think that they have some kind of ability to be able to do that. So if Sandy's able to step into that, she really will, but looking at this, really will find herself. So that's the end of this episode of the Sensitive Mind Show. If you've enjoyed it and found it helpful, do share it with your friends, and be sure to join me next week, where I'll be looking forward to giving you an alternative perspective on your relationship dilemma. Bye for now, and let me leave you with this.